files.winston, ignore that, associates / file browser, and I think you have to have that capital F and that capital B. Then it's pretty easy. Then you can click on Chase files. It's kind of midway down on the. These are in alphabetical order. And then class, not very hard to find, and then the one thing in there. So type in that much, Chase files, and class, and you should be able to download that zip. Did you plug in this power here? Sure. Some stuck. Feels really nice being able to be late to a class again, and it's not that big of a deal. I'm just teasing. So I actually graduated from CU, 2005-ish, I think. I am probably not that quite as a adept authority as Jay highlighted, but I'm pretty good. I've been a computer nerd my whole life and used urban design as sort of an avenue to be useful. I work for a, well, it was just recently a small firm in Boulder, Winston Associates. And we just merged with a California firm, so now we're sort of medium-sized. Anyway, what I do, all day long I do computer graphics. I do 3D simulations or 2D graphics for urban design and landscape architecture projects. What is this going to look like when it gets built? What, you know, a lot of it at the end of the day is just communicating. Being able to communicate graphically is a huge deal, especially for us. And I think, you know, obviously computers have changed that. And I think they've sort of lifted the bar for us and lowered it for everyone else. There's an expectation that great 3D graphics are super attainable for every project, and to some degree they are. It is. It's a lot easier for us to do good visualizations and to make really compelling graphics that illustrate the project and the drawbacks and what the trade-offs and the constraints pretty well. But there's also, you know, I think higher expectations out there for that as well. So has everyone gotten this? We're going to be using it. So if you haven't, you're slowing everyone down. One thing, zip files, this always comes up. So I've taught quite a few SketchUp things. I've done a lot of these kind of crash courses. This is going to be by far the biggest one, by about 3 or 4-fold. So this is going to be a little bit more presentation and a little less you know, hands-on. I mean, I know you guys all have laptops, and we're going to try to, there's a few rovers, but this is a huge group to deal with, so we're going to just do the best we can. Zip files, when you get it, extract it. Extract it. I know everyone, a lot of people just use zip files like they do folders. You end up with, if anyone's ever opened email out, you know, attachments out of Outlook, and they've tried to find that attachment right away, it's lost and buried in some folder. The same thing happens when you just open files right out of a zip. You really need to get those files out of that zip and into your desktop or some other place. Any questions? Okay. So some examples. Let's just do a little quick overview. So most all of my projects involve SketchUp very, very heavily. Some of them stay there. Other ones move on to other places. This is on Pearl Street. This was for, you guys I'm sure are familiar with the building. The architect was considering, he did get approved to put a 3rd floor on this building. And then this was the graphics that the city council had requested to to help them understand the impacts and help the adjacent owners understand the impacts. So this was all done in SketchUp, and then there's a kind of a photoreal plugin called Shaderlight, I think is the one I use for this. There's another good one called V-Ray, but that one's pretty pricey. Anyway, we can talk about some of those things later. Boulder Transit Village. This is now totally obsolete since they've redone everything, but I think this is another good example. One of the things that I think a lot of people expect out of 3D graphics, I don't know, maybe that's not true. But one of the hopes, I'm sure for all of you, is to be able to do those, like that first one I showed, and that was a horrible example to show that one first. Photorealistic stuff I don't know, 1 in 10 projects. It's not relevant, and the cost-benefit ratio is not there most of the time. This, on the other hand, happens all of the time. Things that, I don't know, I like to call them a really good conceptual level. It's not photoreal, it's not supposed to be, but it's really easy for someone who doesn't do design or is a tax lawyer. I mean, they're so far removed from this that all they have to do is look at this and they instantly understand it. Oh, sidewalks, some trees, buildings, mixed use, okay, great, I get it. That should be your goal in using SketchUp, not the photoreal stuff. That's great, and there's a place for that. But so these are some graphics for some potential build-out scenarios for the Pollard site in town. Let's see. This was a kind of a plaza library design. This is in Carson City, Nevada. We worked with an architect. They designed the library, and we designed sort of the rest of it. Streetscape, this public plaza. This nice little thing I made one night. But being able to present these kinds of graphics help generate funding for these types of projects. This is all in SketchUp, and then there's this one's worth writing down. Photo Sketcher, with an F, not a PH. Photo Sketcher. So you've probably seen that SketchUp has some ability to do kind of like sketchy line styles. If you export that and then give it kind of this watercolor wash, it does twice as good with landscape architecture stuff. If your project is about trees and shrubs and grading, this is what you want to do. One of the hardest things in 3D graphics is to do soft things like vegetation. Don't try. Fake it. We've gotten so much mileage for all of our landscape architecture projects out of doing this really kind of soft, at least some soft graphics like this, where there's a mass of green stuff at the end of the day that's a little indistinguishable. For these kind of vignette, bird's eye graphics to kind of try to describe the sense of the place. I've sort of gone off here on a tangent. How many of you guys know have used SketchUp?
Kind of a beginning. I mean, most of them we did in a previous class, and then we had kind of a beginning refresher for people who kind of try to get everybody on the same page on Monday.
So, how many of you know the difference between a group and a component? Okay, that's good. That's what I expected. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else here super relevant. Urban designy. Here are some kind of different build-out scenarios in Tennessee. Here's kind of trying to create a downtown core. Really, really simple graphics go a long way. Finding your own graphic style is really important. You guys will become very intimate with the 3D warehouse in a not too distant future. And there's a lot of crap. And you have to start to grab it and make your own library of parts that you like. For example, none of these buildings existed. I stole all of these buildings, I think, from the 3D warehouse, but then I removed their textures, cleaned them up so that I could have this crisp graphic style for this. It wasn't about the buildings, it was about the arrangement of all of this stuff. maybe lastly, that one I think is not going to work. Anyway, that's probably enough. Go ahead.
How do you exactly navigate 3D Warehouse? Because I was
Okay.
working on it, but it's kind of overwhelming. So like, for example, when you had all those buildings, what did you exactly type into specific types?
Yeah.
Or
Okay, when you're in search mode for stuff, trees, cars, buildings, whatever, you use the web interface. Don't do it via the inside SketchUp. That's easier to just download stuff from there and then go back through it and clean it up. I don't know, for the buildings, a mixed use building goes a long way. And you just have to be patient. There is a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, people keep uploading more and more useless stuff every day.
Can you explain what 3D Warehouse is?
Okay, so 3D Warehouse is something that when Google had SketchUp has an interesting history, but when they had it, they started to develop an online repository for 3D content. Part of it had to do with there was going to be a place to collect buildings for Google Earth and have users help them generate their 3D Earth content, or their Google Earth content. But it's an online repository where I know that I'm assuming, I should say that there's a lot of the same name, Camelot, this guy. If you want to find a model from him, it's usually pretty good. I'm pretty sure Google has, or at the SketchUp rather, has hired some people to help build some stuff in important locations, but it's just user-generated stuff. You want to show off your 3D models, put them on 3D Warehouse. So it's, and the 3D Warehouse is really that collection of stuff and a way to help search it. There's some tags associated with models that get uploaded, so mixed-use building, or I don't know, urban sprawl. I don't think urban sprawl is going to probably find you anything, but people will, trees. So there's a lot of things in models that make it more believable. People and cars and trees are the big three. The first thing you guys need to find are good people, cars, and trees. More than just making it look like it's not, zombie apocalypse, it gives scale. Someone can look at one still image and understand that building's 2 or 3 peoples tall. Okay, so it's a 2-story building. So let's see. If you guys have got this opened up, why don't you open up 01 starter? And where are all of my notes? So there's a whole bunch of parts of, I can probably even do this. I mean, this is gonna be pretty basic. I'm gonna try to go over this basic stuff quick. Someone start alerting me. You guys are gonna have to interrupt me. Once again, I have a Star Trek ringtone. I'm a huge dork. I do this all day long. I will say things all day long that I take for granted, and you guys will not. So you have to interrupt me. So just some verbiage. These I'm gonna need to change this stuff. Okay, you guys are gonna have some different looking bars, and we're gonna talk about that almost right away. These are your toolbars. These guys up here. This whole thing is just your 3D viewport. Down here, and I know most of you aren't going to be able to see it, but the very bottom right-hand corner, there should be something that says measurements and a little box there. It's a huge deal. That's how you do things to specific distances. And we'll talk about that, but that is an important box for all of your lengths and amounts. To the left of that, kind of in the middle of the bottom bar, it's just called the status bar, and there's lots of good tool tips that live there. So when you have the move tool selected, it'll say hold down control and then you can copy something. I know you guys are going to struggle remembering which keys do what, and there's only really a few keys that are relevant, but it will hold some of those tidbits of knowledge for you, so you don't have to write them down. This stuff on the left is just irrelevant. The instructor one, the little question mark one, is kind of useful. You might find it helpful. It pulls up this tool pellet off to the side that has even more information and some little cute graphics. So yeah, that's a little on-demand thing, and it changes. So here's a select tool, here's the pencil tool, line tool. So and it keeps that same kind of stuff. You know, here's some tidbits of information, modifier keys, that kind of stuff. That's where that's a quick access to it. Those last 3 buttons are totally worthless. Ignore them. Okay. And you can't see this. Oh yeah, and my cute little face there, in the right. I forgot about that one. I thought I'd class it up for you guys a little bit today. So let's see. We're going to start to go through, and then obviously the menu bars at the top. We'll go through these sort of as needed, but they're pretty well organized. File is pretty basic stuff, printing and saving. Edit, cut, copy, paste, some hiding stuff, views, generally kind of your graphic style, camera stuff, drawing, editing, and then Windows. We'll go through this a lot, but Windows is where right there, where is it? Instructor lives in here. All of these little tiny tool pellets, like your materials, all of these things live there. So if a window looks sort of like this and you lost it somewhere, underneath window is where they all live. And then plugins and help. I know it's slightly different on the Mac and the PC, and I took some notes because they're actually really similar. The biggest difference is when I say Alt, Macs think Command, and Control equals Option. So, and it's really consistent, but I don't have a Mac, and I'm not going to remember that stuff. But I will talk about it. Whenever you hold down a modifier key like Control or Alt, your cursor always changes to reflect it. I couldn't even tell you what the modifier keys do, mostly because it's probably ingrained in my brain, but also because I just watch the cursor. I just hold down a couple different ones until I get the right cursor. Like if you're trying to select more stuff, you hold down the Shift key and your select cursor gets like a little plus minus next to it. So it's really intuitive. You don't, once again, don't write it down. Just remember that some of those modifier keys change your cursor icon, and it will tell you exactly what you need to know. Let's see. Okay, so I've changed this a little bit for today. Navigating is such an important deal. It's so difficult to draw in the 3D space on a 2D screen. So I'm sort of forcing everyone to we're going to actually have to kind of navigate through a 3D scene through most of this, just to sort of force you to get comfortable navigating, because it's hands down the most important part. It's more important than being able to draw well, in fact, I think. Being able to move your view, move your camera to the right location so that you can accomplish what you want is half the game. The navigation tools. I need to talk about, the menus here. View, okay, so all of these toolbars that we were talking about earlier, these guys on the top and the left here, view toolbars is where they all live. And let me turn off a couple so that we're generally on the same page. You guys probably have something called Getting Started. Oh my goodness. Getting Started is probably what you have up. And let me just... Wouldn't it be great if my computer crashed right now? Anyway, so you guys all have something called Getting Started up. So if you go under there, uncheck Getting Started and check Large Toolset, I believe it's called. And if you can even drag it to the left. This whole column here, this double column, is the large tool set. Yeah, that's really awkward. SketchUp does crash. It's better than some things, I would say, in this world. We can talk later about auto-saving and backing up and stuff. Remind me. Yeah, okay, that's great. So did everyone find that? Large tool set, just so that this is the full palette. And I'll turn off this other stuff so that we don't have to, styles. Okay, and that one's gone too, that sandbox. Okay, so if you click, and then these guys, we haven't talked about that either. These are these scene tabs, and I set these up. We'll talk about them more in depth later, but right now these are chapters for this conversation, okay? So if you guys all get to navigation, here is the magic. And I'm sure there's lots of non-mice in this room because you're on your lap, on a laptop, I get it. It's gonna be difficult. First, I'll just talk about the tools, and I'll talk about why the mouse is so important. So those view tools live right here. They're this set of blue stuff. So the orbit tool, which I also don't have that. Okay. The orbit tool is O. There's a lot of default shortcuts, and I'll try to remind you of them. But if you just press the O key, you should get the orbit tool, or you can click right here next to the hand. It lets you orbit. So if you click and drag, it'll let you, turn around to the back. The hand tool next to it, pan, H, lets you pan, and lastly the zoom, Z. The little magnifying glass. If you click and drag up and down, it zooms you in and out. So try to navigate yourself in back here, zoom in on me and explore. If for those of you with a mouse, it's all about your middle mouse button. Regardless of what tool you have, your middle mouse button, if you hold it down, if you hold down the scroll wheel, turns your cursor into the orbit tool. If you scroll, it zooms you in and out. And if you hold down Shift and the middle mouse button, you get the pan tool. So just with the middle mouse button, you can do all three of those, basically. So try to get in here and move. Just try to zoom down the street. Try to move through this little urban design-y project. Am I killing you? Is everyone in the room really comfortable doing this already? Okay, fair enough. Manipulating. You can just click on the scene tab and we'll get in here. So I have some cars. So these are all groups. We're going to first talk about just the making things simple and being able to select and move groups. Select tool. Shortcut is the space bar. If you select something like this red car, you can then choose the move tool, which is this guy here, or press M and get it. And just try to move it around a couple spaces. One of the nice things about groups is if you have a group selected, you can sort of easily rotate them with these little red crosshairs that pop up on its bounding box. Scale tool, stretch it uniformly. Okay, you guys know this apparently. Moving along. Reshaping. As a rule of thumb, this is something that I've learned over time, and I don't know if many other big SketchUp dorks would argue with me. It's generally easier to recreate something than to modify something. So if this is just an ungrouped blob of red stuff, you can select faces and move these around as you like. But generally speaking, this is a really simple shape. It's easier just to delete some of the parts that aren't where you want them and just draw in new lines where you do. Just kind of let that float at the back of your brain while you work on larger projects. So one of the things that's worth noting at this, with this geometry that's, I guess, loose, that's not in a group, if you're trying to modify individual faces. Sometimes if you're trying to move something and it won't move, like if I want to move this plane up along blue, I can't. Even if I press the up, well, I guess if I force it, but if I have to either press the up arrow to force to lock my axes into the blue one, or you have to do something called auto folding, which is Alt. If you look at the very bottom of your screen, if you have the Move tool active, there's this Alt toggles auto folding, and that what SketchUp's trying to do is if I'm trying to move this surface up, it would force a lot of other surfaces to get bent, to get folded, and SketchUp thinks, why would you want to do that? You've already modeled something nice. Why are you trying to bend it? And that's the trick. You have to either force it into an axis with the arrow keys. For those of you who don't know, the arrow keys are a way of automatically snapping and locking your motion, your direction into one of the red, green, or blue axes. Okay, so manipulating, you know how to rotate? Everyone is comfortable rotating stuff? Hands, this is for you. Okay, there were enough, I guess. Creating. So this is where I'm going to start to beat this stuff into your head, whether you like it or not now. So click on the Creating tab. I cannot harp on this enough. The most powerful thing and sometimes frustrating thing about SketchUp is the ability to snap intelligently, or to let SketchUp help you infer right angles generally. So what I'd like you to do is make a cube from scratch. So I gave you 2 angles, or two edges of it, and I'd like you to go through the process of finishing the bottom part, so you have a flat plane, and then making it 3D, all by hand, not using push-pull. So then go up and make sure that you're using those dotted inference lines. There are a couple. Okay, excellent question. So there are a couple methods, and these are subtleties that relate to you as a user. So if just using my mouse and the line tool, if I start making this line and it snaps to red, and I start moving it along red, it will automatically kind of snap and put up that little dotted green line, showing that it's inferring that distance. The other part, though, the shift thing, and I use shift. I don't do that. I don't have time to wait for SketchUp to figure out what it's locking to. What I do is, as soon as I get my line as soon as it snaps to the red axis, I hold down shift, and it gets, let me move that up here so you guys can see a little bit better in the back. It gets thick. When you hold down shift, that line gets thick, and it constrains it, is what the SketchUp lingo is. It constrains it to the red axis. So wherever I move my cursor, it's only going to be making that line along the red axis. The trick here is that if I move my cursor over the next endpoint that I want to align with, I can force my current red line to be that same length without thinking or waiting for SketchUp to do the little dotted things. So then I click on this endpoint and then just close it in. This is just, so I start making a blue line, hold down shift, and then hover over this first vertical leg I made. And then click, and then let go of shift, and then close it in. Click, find blue, hold down shift, hover over the point I want to align with, click, let go of shift. That's the way I would recommend it, but you don't actually have to use the shift key. SketchUp has gotten a lot better in 8 about guessing without using shift. So anyway, get your guys self a box made. The inference thing is so huge. This, please raise your hand if this is not crystal clear. Okay, moving along. Okay.
I'm just not getting it lined up exactly. It's just I should use this shift tool.
The shift, I think the shift thing really helps. The biggest blight of SketchUp is when things are close and not quite right? Because those subtle shifts are hard for us to see, but make the model not work at all. So if you're having issues, other people are, why don't you guys seriously make 10 cubes there in this time until I get back up here. There is no way I'm going to get in here, is there? Oh my gosh, I'm off a whole row here. Okay, maybe this isn't going to work.
Sorry. But is it just like holding shift?
Yeah, so here, let's go back a couple. Let's start.
I built the cube, but it was just uneven.
Okay.
And then I just did some weird stuff.
Okay.
Everybody was able to download that zip file, right?
And then just
Yeah. So right. Yeah. See, as soon as it turns green, then you can hold down Shift and it thickens up. Now move your cursor over here, and it'll snap to that. And see this dotted line does the same thing. It's similar. I mean, if we.
I go like that.
Oh my gosh, your poor little Mac here. What'd you do to it? If it's similar to just clicking and then letting it, as soon as you kind of get over there, it'll, or if you touch this first maybe.
I could just hold on shift.
Yeah, I would just hold down Shift. Maybe this is this a different version? I don't know, maybe it's, I don't
This is
know.
the newest version.
I don't know. Shift is your goal.
Okay.
Maybe it's slightly different on the Mac. It's not quite, it hasn't caught up yet.
Okay.
I don't think they love the Mac as much anymore. But yeah, that's exactly how you do it. Shift, and then click, and then let go of Shift. So now try some of these vertical ones.
Do I just?
I would start from the bottom and go up.
Okay.
So just make sure it's on blue.
And then,
Any distance. It doesn't need to be
Really
anything
matter.
specific now.
and then
So for this guy,
one.
if you don't, yeah. So right now it's trying to make that line. If you want to do that one instead, we just hit Escape or hit the line tool again, L, and it'll stop that one you're doing, and then
do that.
yeah. So now you can. Oh, okay, that works too. So L. There you go.
Okay. I get it all.
But you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay.
Do you know how to constrain to perpendicular and parallel?
Okay. We'll get there actually. It's like one or two up here. Anyone else? Okay. So let's move on to inference. So here are some random shapes with holes cut out of them that I'd like you to finish using the inference stuff. So obviously for this cube, L, we need to make a red line that extends this high and then close it in. For the triangle, here's someone just asked about parallel. There are a couple for the triangle, for the rectangle, it's easy because we're on red and green. For the triangle, though, we have to find some magic point here in the middle where these two lines intersect. And here's how you go about it. Magenta is the color that represents both parallel and perpendicular. They figure they're 90 degrees apart. You should be able to tell which one's which. If you click on this endpoint, and what I like to do is sort of just backtrack. I haven't clicked, but I just backtrack a little bit and hover over this line segment, and it usually says on edge. At this point, you can then usually try to extend out a line, and it should be magenta. Then you can hold down Shift, and then hover over not the end point, but the line segment, somewhere on the line. If you hover over the endpoint, it'll try to make a right angle to that endpoint. Rather, you want to hover over this line and say, I want this line to intersect this other line. So then I hover over this guy and click, let go of Shift, and then I can click again. And, well, it doesn't actually, oh, there it is. I did get closed in. It's just the other side's showing. Same with this guy. Endpoint, backtrack, magenta, hold down shift, hover over the line segment. And then try these 3D shapes. Who had the question?
Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna click, right? Go back. Hold shift down, and it's just a blue.
It is, and that's just because your view.
Oh.
You just happen to be at a view where the vertical line is right in line with what you kind of want. So if you just orbit over a little bit. Yeah.
Because sometimes it just like doesn't snap. And it's still. Oh, I see how that's like going.
There it is. Perfect. No, that was right. Then click, and then you can let go of shift, and then you can finish
Okay,
it.
got it.
So making things groups would help with like managing the file size.
Not the file size. In fact, making groups probably adds a little bit. Making things components saves a little bit, because if you have like one tree, or you have one tree type, you can make it a component. Well, what it does is it remembers all of the geometry in one place and then all of the locations of that geometry. But groups are not important for file size. Groups are important for organization and not going insane.
Because then it's all separate little lines.
So components help a little bit with that. But geometry is generally a lot smaller than textures. Textures are the biggest file increase.
What about that OpenGL?
OpenGL is just what it uses to display on your screen. It doesn't have to do with the file size at all.
So there's no solution for this file section?
No, I don't know. You know, in all honesty, this is going to both piss off anyone from Google or from SketchUp. I'm still in the habit of saying that. I like 7 better. I mean, 8 has got some great features, and because I pull in so much photography from Google Maps, I use it. But if I keep trying to do something and it's splatting, 7 is almost always more stable. Almost always. Especially for big sandbox things. If you're like cutting in huge chunks of grading into a landscape, 7 is 100% better. I don't know. That's just, you guys should generally not be having that issue. These things shouldn't get too big and unwieldy. But 7 is more stable. I haven't noticed any difference between the free and the pro version. This is the pro version, but the pro features, there are like 3, and 2 of them are stupid. That differentiate the free and the pro versions. So I don't, they do a great job differentiating the paid version and how professionals would use it versus the whole rest of the world. Any other questions germane to this or not? Okay. How are you guys doing? Is this, did I make these boxes here and stuff here good enough that they're actually closing in? Okay. Let me walk around here and see where you guys are. How you late kids doing back here? Freaking slackers, all of you. Yeah.
She's having a problem.
Ah. Okay. Sometimes this happens. And I think it's called this fast feedback. I have absolutely no idea what this toggle does, no idea. But it tends to fix this issue.
Okay.
So I think we probably need to.
Awesome.
Thank you. I would have taken you forever.
I still have no idea what it does though.
I'm just wondering if you use the SketchUp Pro, the tryout. Can I open this in like normal SketchUp later?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the file types are the same. They're the formats are the same.
Yeah, thank you.
Quick question. Was Photosketcher a plugin or a separate application?
It's a separate application and it's free.
Okay, cool. Great.
It just does that stuff. It's great.
A massive landscape area. So
It just the style works good for landscape stuff. There's just no way to do soft vector graphics for trees. Okay, good. Okay, so that was line stuff. How come I keep losing my face? So push-pull, of course, you guys know this much about push-pull. That push-pull, kind of, you use it to make flat faces a three-dimensional shape. When you select it, P is the shortcut. When you hover over a flat surface, it will kind of auto-select it and hatch it for you. What I wanted you to do is just practice the same kind of thing using the inference lingo, except you don't actually have to hold down Shift for this, which is nice, to make the same shaped cube using those starting points. So this guy, if you click and then move your cursor either over any of these endpoints or these lines, it will sort of extrude it to the same height. It's just getting you comfortable using other geometry to influence the height and distance of the stuff you're building right now. So then from the left to the right, front to back, I actually have no idea why I drew that because you can't really do anything. I guess you could use this one. That would work. Going down. That was supposed to be pretty quick, but just it's different. Because there aren't any axes, pushing and pulling is a one-dimensional thing. You can only go one direction, perpendicular to that surface. All right, other tools. Is that all good? Questions? Oh, one of the things, let me go back. Sorry, I lied. The one other thing I wanted to make you aware of, if you didn't know, is push-pull is one of its modifier keys, the control key. Once again, who cares what control is? Shift, Alt, Control. One of these is going to do something. If I hold down it turns out, oops, P. I just freaked it out. The control key will toggle a little plus sign next to my cursor. And it will say that at the bottom. Control, toggle, create new surface. So what the little plus key with push-pull does is it leaves a division in there for you. It creates a new face rather than sort of just moving that existing face. And this is useful in, I don't know, saving you from having to draw new lines generally. Did that make sense? Oh, navigating, manipulating. Okay, other tools. Frankly, these are just time savers. The arc is useful, I guess, because it's pretty hard to draw an arc segment by segment. But these make some other shapes. It's just these other guys here. Rectangle goes corner to corner. Circles are circles. They go center out. Sorry, there's no, for you CAD junkies, there's no like 3-point circles or anything. Polygons, you can choose the sides. So the one thing you can do with this is type in as soon as you choose the tool, you can type in a number and hit enter, and it'll change the number of sides of this polygon. So right now it's on 6. I could type in a 3 and hit enter and make a triangle. Arc tool. endpoint, endpoint, and the amount of deflection, and then freehand lets you draw freehand stuff. And it's pretty tough to do anything really useful with the freehand tool other than trace contours. It's not bad for, I don't know, sometimes you want really rough shapes or it doesn't matter and you're just doing it quick, but the freehand tool gets very little love from me. If I'm really making something that's sort of semi-curvilinear, I'll just make a series of arcs if it matters. Okay, questions? Moving along. Deleting. We haven't talked about selecting, and I just want to make sure that I cover all of the ways and the differences in the methods. So if you single click on something, you get that face, either that face or that edge. If you double click, you'll get that, oops, too close in. Double click, I'll get that face and all of its edges. Or if I double click on an edge, I'll get that edge and the faces it's separating. If I triple click, I can get all of the faces that are connected or touching at all. Dragging bounding boxes with the select tool left to right, it needs to fully enclose it. So if I only drag this box over half this cube, I'll only get that one edge. Versus going right to left, it just needs to be touching. So if I do the same thing, I'll get most of that cube. I'll get all of these faces and edges just shy of this stuff here on this one edge. You guys all know this? Once again, modifier keys, Control puts up a plus, the Shift key puts up a plus minus, so it toggles whatever you touch. If it's selected, it gets unselected, and vice versa. And then it looks like the magic combination is Shift Control gives you the minus. So you can deselect things. And if you forget those things and are panicked, you have no idea, they're not at the bottom of the status bar here, but I guarantee that they're in that instructor window. Go.
If you select the whole cube and you just decide you don't want to select any of it, is there like a deselect?
There is a deselect, and this is one of the things. So SketchUp comes with a bunch of defaults, and apparently Control-T is the select none option. The other thing you can do is click off into the background, which it's hard to see the background in that view, but if you click off into the sky, you'll also select none. And then deleting. So the point was you can select things and then press the delete key or use the eraser. The shortcut is E, and you just click and drag over the top of stuff to delete it. Okay? Straightforward. Let's go to offset. So, make a balcony. Offset's really easy. It works pretty similar to push-pull in the sense that, was it O? Nope, F. F is offset.
What about the break and minus?
Good point. Sorry, let's go back, deleting. It's even on it's like on the screen there. So one of the things that's frustrating is that there's not a way to break a line in half. There's not a break tool. The only way to make a line segment shorter is to connect a line maybe to the middle, so you can snap to the midpoint, cyan, and you connect a line segment and then choose the eraser and erase the segments you don't want. There's no break tool. That's just how you have to do it. And that's not necessarily intuitive. Okay, so offset. F is the offset tool. So everyone familiar with offset? I heard one no. That means there's probably a couple more. So offset works in a similar way as push-pull in that it kind of auto-selects whatever you hover over. So if I choose F and I hover over this plane, it'll hatch it. And what it does is it puts a little dot on the nearest edge to your cursor. It's going to be its reference point. So what it's indicating to you is we're going to measure an offset distance from that point to your cursor. So if you click, then you can either start to drag in from that location or out. In this case, we want to go in. Like with any of SketchUp's tools, do you guys know how to do specific distances for stuff yet? So you just type a distance and hit enter midway through any operation, basically. So in this case, we're going to offset this in, let's say, 2 feet. So 2 apostrophe enter. I think feet are the default unit in this. And then P to push pull to either push this down or pull the other part up, one or the other. The other thing then, if we turn the corner here, make some doors and windows. This was a little exercise to F to offset some different parts. One of the nice things with both push-pull does this and offset, if you double-click on a surface, it will repeat the last amount that you just did, which is a huge time saver. If you're making a whole bunch of building footprints that you're popping up to 15 feet, just as context buildings that are irrelevant, do one at 15 feet and then double-click on the rest, and they will pop up to that same height. Same thing with offset. How long is class, by the way?
Typically till 9, but we can,
Till 9?
yeah, so, but I'd say, I'm half 9:30. I think 9:30.
Oh, okay. That's what I was thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe like another half an hour? Is that?
No, I was expecting till 11. Anyway, we'll just keep going. Okay, offset and double clicking all makes sense. Okay, so let's next one. Follow me. So follow me is really sexy. What it does is lets you sort of extrude, like use push pull along a path. And there are 2 methods. So this is the follow me button. Double click, or excuse me, this guy right there, right below push pull. So there are 2 ways. You can either select the follow me tool, click on what I would call your profile surface, the one that you're going to be pushing and pulling around. And then you can actually do is just drag it along a path. So you can do really sexy, complicated things like a planter without a lot of effort. I mean, it's literally, this is important because it's literally impossible to join these arced parts at these 3D angles. It's a huge thing. Okay, so the click and drag method works, and you just kind of have to be patient with it. But this is not the recommended method to do it, because you end up fighting at the end, and then all of a sudden you are doing weird things like what's this? How did I even get that? And you're never going to fix that. So here is how you should do it. What you would do, it's a 2-step thing. You select the path, and then you choose the follow me tool, and then you click on your profile. So if you double click on this bottom part, on the base, on the path, and then deselect the surface, so then you just have the edges. Then click on the follow me tool, and then click on the surface profile. It just does it for you.
When you did the windows, did you do it that way where you double-clicked to get the face and then deselected the face to get all 4 corners, or did you select each one?
I did them individually.
Okay, so you just select each one instead of...
Yeah. So what I did is I just I just offset this one and then double-clicked, and it repeated that same amount. Yeah. Okay. Because follow me is so sexy, you get it twice.
I have a question. How come sometimes the shapes turn blue and how come sometimes they turn white?
Okay, great question. The blues. Okay, so SketchUp thinks of geometry as being all 2-sided. So a single triangle has a front side and a back side, and they're both visible. This is not the case in lots of other 3D software. By default, the back side is invisible. And SketchUp's trying to help you out and knows that if you're going to export this to something like 3D Studio Max, by default, the back faces are invisible. So the default is the purple is the back side and the white is the front side. So if it matters, and it won't since you're living in here generally, but you should try to keep the white sides facing out. They should be the visible face. And that's what that is. Okay, so follow me again. So the path. So you double click to select this whole surface, and then shift click to deselect the surface. So then you just have the outside path. Then choose the Follow Me tool. And then click on the surface of that profile. And it will drag it around for you.
Is there any way to combat that camera cutting off?
Yeah, and this didn't happen quite so much at home. This is an effect called frustum clipping, or frustum clipping. And it happens in geographically large models. Because this little tiny thing has all of this other junk around it, SketchUp kind of needs to be able to think about all of this stuff and keep everything ordered when it renders it front to back. So what it does is it tries to cheat and push the first point you can see farther away from your nose. The only way to solve it is to make your model not so geographically large. It's a proportional relationship to how big your model is and how close you're trying to get into something. It is, in my opinion, one of SketchUp's only real big flaws is that there's no way to manually control that. Sometimes when it's really bad, if you go into a group and hide the rest of the model, where's hide at? Or show, where is it? View. Hide rest of model. And hide similar components. So you're just looking at this one individual group, and then go zoom extents, which is this button here. It'll kind of bring things back and clean up that relationship a little bit. So then when you go back out into the real world, you can sometimes get in a little bit closer, but it's a drawback. It really is. So, and when you're doing big landscape projects and you maybe want to have some views of the mountains in the background, don't bring them in from Google Earth, because it will definitely compromise your ability to get on the ground close for the stuff that matters. You're going to have to fake it. Put in some kind of wallpaper in the background or something. Okay, did Follow Me work out? Okay. Photo texturing. So let me quickly go through this before the rubber meets the road here and make sure I haven't omitted anything huge. Okay, last thing. Let's go back. Click back to Follow Me. I do want to talk about groups and components. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. So in this model, in general, I have a few things. I mean, I built this for a project, so it's okay. It was a little quick. Groups and components. Okay, so the difference between groups and components. You've heard both these terms, I assume. You've at least heard of them. A group is just a collection of stuff that's sort of segregated from the rest of the model. A component is identical, except that it shares changes with its twins. So if you make a copy of a group and then go inside one of those groups and edit it, you've only changed that one group. If you do that with a component, you will have changed it and all of the other copies of that component that you've made, which is very useful. But just as many times as it's been useful, I've inadvertently changed other parts of my model that I didn't want to. So you have to be really careful. So let's talk about groups and components just a touch more. Did that all make sense, at least in concept? Components share changes. Components share changes. So let's make, I don't know. Let's talk about making a group. So here, let's just go back to our planter. We'll pull that up. Oh, this effect here, just so you have a word for it, it's called z-fighting. And this plane of the bottom of this planter is in the exact same place as this ground plane. And SketchUp just can't decide which one to draw first. So anyway, let's pull that up. OK, so to make a group, in this case, because there's nothing else attached to our planter, we can just triple click on it or drag one big bounding box around it, and then right click, and let me move this up a little bit. Right click, and there are two options: make group and make component. They look like this is a little bit better. So if you choose make group, you're done. It puts a little bounding box around it, and you can interact with it as one big whole part. All you have to do is single click on it. To edit groups, let's say you need to, I don't know, put more or less dirt in this planter. You can double click on it, is the easiest way by far. And then you get inside, and then you can actually manipulate the individual parts of it. And then either hit escape if you're zoomed in really close, or if you just click outside these dotted bounding, the dotted lines that are the bounding box, you'll go back out to normal space. Is that all crystal clear? Groups are easy. And you can have groups within groups within groups, and they keeps the hierarchy. And it's the way you should model everything. It's the way you should organize your model. I typically have only one thing ungrouped at a time. It's the one thing I'm working on at that time. And then as soon as I finish it, I group it and then move on to something else. I cannot harp on that enough. OK, so let me go undo. So we get back here to its ungrouped state. OK, so let's pretend now that we know we're going to have a whole bunch of planters. And they're going to be identical to this one. Maybe we don't know exactly what the materials are going to be yet, but we know at least the locations of them. So we can use this as kind of a placeholder. So we can be thinking about it. And on the back end, when we do know what materials this is going to have, we can just do it to one single model, and it'll replicate those changes everywhere. So once again, triple click on it to get it all selected. Make sure it's not a group anymore if you undo a couple times. Right click, and then right next to it is make component. And this is the defining part that's a little bit different. You get this window to pop up. And we are going to ignore some of this stuff for now. The only thing that's really important is that this bottom box is checked. Replace selection with component. You can give it a name, and it's a good idea to name this stuff. It'll help you at some point find things that are lost later on. Planter. And then hit create. And same thing, it's a group, you move it around, it looks and feels and walks like a group. You double click to get into it. But here's where the magic is. So if I make a copy, does everyone know how to make a copy using the move tool? No. I heard a no, I heard some yeses and nos. Who know? This is an important one. If you do not understand, if you do understand, raise your hands. How about that? If you do understand, raise your hands. Okay, that's a way better to ask the question that way. Okay, so here's how you do it. So you have your group selected. You choose your move tool, M, modifier key. At the bottom, you can see it. It'll say Control equals toggle copy. Who cares what button it is? I'm going to press the modifier keys until I figure out which one it is. You get a little plus next to your move icon. Now you're in not just move mode, you're in copy mode. And if you use it just like you would, I'm going to slide it over here along the green axis. This is how you make a copy. This is, in fact, the only way you should make copies. You should not use copy and paste. Copying and pasting has its place in SketchUp, but it's not for this. It's not for duplicating.
And if you hold down Shift, it'll slide it along like a red or green axis.
Yeah, it'll lock it in exactly the same way. So you start the copy with Control, and then you find your axis, and then hold down Shift. Yeah, so let me guess. So you did this, and then this is where you got. So you just have to find one of those axes is all. Or better in this case, if I were to select this, move, copy, if I were to grab one of these, snap to one of these points at the bottom, then I would be dragging around the bottom point, and it would then snap to the ground plane.
Okay. I was actually found out this morning. Can you use this tool then to array?
Yes, I didn't want to go there, but we can talk about arrays. It's just a huge time sink. So arrays are cool. So here's the magic. So here we have, in fact, let's grab a tree. Here's the copy and paste thing. Copying and pasting is good to move an object from inside a group to outside of a group, or from inside one SketchUp model to another. That's it too. So I'm going to copy this tree, and then I'm going to come out here and paste it. Okay, so I have this tree. You guys could use the planter or whatever. I just grabbed the tree. So here, let me talk about this in concept first. Hear my words, watch my motions, and then we'll walk through it, because it's going to take us 3 iterations to get it. Just because there's a lot of button pushing at specific times. So I have a tree selected. I grab my move tool, and I make one copy, just like we talked about doing before. Then I do some keystroking. I press the asterisk key, which is Shift 8, and then a number. So asterisk 5, and then hit enter. And what it does is it repeats that same offset, in this case 4 more times. It counts the first one. Okay, so let's step through this. Grab your planter or your tree or whatever you just made. So you have it selected. Choose your move tool, M, and make one copy. So I'm going to press the control key to get my little plus. I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag, and then I'm going to click again, and I've finished my copy. My new tree is selected. It's done. We've completed the operation. But before you rotate your view or do anything else or change tools, you need to then type asterisk and a number and hit enter. So asterisk 6, enter. Okay, 10 more of you got it. So undo. Well, I'll step through this again. Select my tree, choose my move tool, toggle on copy mode, click, move it over, and click again. I've finished copying. Then type in Shift 8 for the asterisk and a number, and then enter. Don't type 10,000. You'll crash SketchUp. It'll try. It will, and every time it crashes SketchUp. So, or brings it to its knees, and you have to wait 10 minutes. Okay, one more time. Select your first shape, move tool, toggle on copy mode, click, drag, and click so you've finished the copy. Then type in asterisk. You do not need to click in that little measurement bar at the bottom. If that hasn't been said before, you never need to click there. Numbers you type automatically go there. So asterisk 5, and then press enter. So the concept is make a copy, then type in the asterisks and some number. There's a converse of this where you don't know, you just want to evenly space some things. So I have no idea what these tree offsets here are, for example. I don't know the distance amount, but I can't, if I make a copy to the far location, and then instead of using the asterisk, I use the divide by, it's the forward slash, it's the one with the question mark, forward slash, I think it's 4. I will evenly space 4 in that distance, which is equally useful. But it's the exact same method. Questions? Now how many of you can make an array? All right, so we needed about 2 more iterations.
How about this? Do you think how that might be useful for our landscape?
The one thing, and just don't, I know that there's a plugin somewhere. So yeah, what you can do is you can make an array in one direction. If you're making a little garden, make an array in one direction and then select those 10 elements and then make an array in the other direction to get a grid. That's useful. You can with the rotate tool. That's the exact same thing. You use copy with the rotate tool to fan one over and then multiply. So if you have a column of 10 of them and select all of those, you can fan out those the same way. You cannot, however, copy along some curvilinear path. If you want to put little garden lights along a little path, that you have to do by hand. There's a plugin probably to do it somewhere. There is actually a lot of useful SketchUp plugins. In fact, I didn't actually start using them for probably maybe the last year or two, and found a few good ones. But a lot of the real power in SketchUp is built in. There's some plugins that make really specific tasks easier, but don't beat your head up. At the end of this, there's a couple of links I can maybe point you towards. Okay, so copying in arrays, groups. Oh, so did I finish that? We got sidetracked on the groups thing. So if you make did we do this? You make a group, and then you can go into either one of these and edit it. So if I go into this one then, and if we go into this one and we'll paint on we'll make some gray dirt because it's in these days. It's chic. It does both. And it would not have done that if there are groups. The one thing that's tough to distinguish in this universe is what's a group and what's a component. I have tons of things in here. Is this a group or is this a component? Are these trees groups or components? This building looks just like this one. Maybe they're different. Maybe they're, who knows? The one way that I know to find out easily is if you right-click on something, anything, on the background even, you get this is called the contextual menu. The very top thing is called entity info. And if you select something, it'll tell you info about that entity. So this building is a group. This planter I just made is a group. And it'll tell you how many there are and its name. These trees, it turns out, are components also. These cars, on the other hand, are actually groups, and it says that. So that's the quickest thing. And this, once again, if you whatever, your right click doesn't work because you're crazy. Underneath window, same thing, entity info. Okay. A lot of there's components also denote resources that come from the shared component libraries that are built into SketchUp or the 3D warehouse. The word's used a little bit interchangeably for both groups that share changes and a library of parts. If you hear component library, it's the same thing. But generally speaking, things that come from the component library or come from the 3D warehouse are components. They are set up that way. So that if you make copies of them, they will by default share changes.
So Chase is just going to kind of keep rolling, depending on what the different sections have planned for today. You can decide to, stay or go, whatever works for your section.
We'll stay.
Yeah, my section too is going to stay at least through the next, put a little lesson, which I think is going to be really helpful for everybody.
Put me up on a pedestal. Okay, so just quickly about those window. If you go underneath window, you will find components. And in here, there's a little pull-down menu. There's a whole bunch, so landscape architecture. If you're online, it'll pull this stuff out of the 3D warehouse. There was that. Oh, that was architecture. I was like, So you can pull in little doors and people. It's just silly to build this kind of reference material that you can find. So anyway, once again, also, I think I'm going to get to that later, so we'll come back to the 3D warehouse in depth in a little bit more. Okay, so let's move on to photo texture. So we're going to definitely shift gears and get into maybe the more fun stuff, more at least visually appealing stuff. So far, do you have any questions? Okay. So here is, I brought in, I think this is the project site you guys are going to be working on, right? The gardens. And I traced off the air photo pretty crudely these pair of greenhouses. So the goal here is then also in that zip file, I have 3 greenhouse textures or images that are going to become textures. We're going to bring these in, stretch them to this surface so that we can photo map our building. No, these are ones Jay sent me.
They're actually of that greenhouse.
One of the things, this is a good caveat. Jay sent me these right from his camera. They were like 5 megs a pop. Insane. Insane for if you start to do that for a whole bunch of buildings, you will develop an insanely huge file quickly. I scaled these down. Remember this number, 1024. It's a little abstract. It's a power of 2. It's a good texture size that you should think of as your maximum width and height. Don't bring in textures that are bigger than that unless it's going to be one of a kind, like your base map or something. For buildings and people and cars and trees and all of that stuff, 1024 is your absolute maximum. And you should generally make things smaller than that. That is your rule of thumb. 1024 pixels, sorry. Photoshop. Photoshop. we can.
We can talk about that more next week.
Let's see. Okay, so anyways, I sized these down. So here's how the magic happens. Let's work with one that's on the angle. Let's do the side one first. So greenhouse side. So if you just kind of come in here, we can get in here pretty close, right? Yeah. We don't actually need to. This is ungrouped. This is kind of live geometry. You don't need to have anything selected. If you go up to the File menu and choose Import, navigate to where you have that stuff. So SketchUp Teaching. Couple of things, and I'm going to make fun of the few of you who ask questions because you're going to, because someone's going to screw this up because they're not listening. They're texting their friends right now. There's a few magic tidbits. The first one is file type. I have AutoCAD selected. That's why I'm not seeing anything, because I don't have any AutoCAD files in there. You have to make sure that you change that to something like all supported image types or JPEG would work. And then the next tidbit, after you have images, are these guys. We want to use as texture. Use as image, they seem pretty interchangeable. Think about choosing the Use As Texture button when you already have a place for it to go. You already have a surface waiting for this texture to get put on it. You sometimes can use As Image for reference material like your base plan, but really I still think that that's a bad idea, and we'll talk about that too. So greenhouse side, Use As Texture, and hit open. So the paint bucket tool sort of pops up, and it kind of wants to align itself to whatever face or whatever surface you hover over. We're just going to click. Don't try to fill up the space. In fact, it would be better if you kind of intentionally leave it small. So I'm going to click, don't use the endpoints. This sounds silly, but just do it right in the middle of the surface. So I'm going to click here and maybe click here. So I get this repeating bad photo on here. File import, image, make sure that you have the file type selected so you can see it, and then use as texture. If you bring it in and it's not repeating, it's because you didn't listen and you chose as image. Does everyone have this? This next step definitely builds on this one. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to think about it. So we already, I eyeballed the size and shape of these greenhouses pretty bluntly. They're probably close-ish. But what we want to do, we already have this geometry defined. We believe that this is the right size for this wall of the building. What we now want to do is stretch this texture out. Right-click. And this contextual, let me move it up. It's at the bottom here. Right-click, texture, position. It's a little varied. Right-click, texture, position. And you get what happens is you can see the image kind of continues to repeat off the surface a little bit. You should get some push pins. They might be all these yellow color ones, or they might be multicolored. But this is, if you're seeing this, you're in the right place. Right-click on one of the pins. Actually, you don't even need to click on a pin. Right-click on the surface of the image here and uncheck fixed pins so that they're all the same color. So you want unfixed pins. Okay, I'm going to move ahead here, and then I'm going to do this so you understand the process, and then we're going to step back through it. Okay. So the concept is that I'm going to pick up these pins. Oh my goodness, this is going to be a little tricky. Okay, change of plans. We can't get in there close enough. Let's see. This is a great opportunity. Undo. Where did everything go? Hit escape so you get back out there. And if you lost the image like I did for some reason, let's re-import that on there. Yes, I do call shenanigans. Okay, so we have it on there. So because this is a geographically large model, you're going to have this problem in the future. We're going to get in here. We need to get in here a little bit closer than that frustrum nightmare lets us. There's one trick to do it temporarily, I guess, to let us get in there and not have that issue, and it's to change our camera from perspective to parallel projection. So at any given time underneath camera, one of these three things needs to be selected. So if you just choose parallel projection, it'll switch you to it. And at this point, who knows what's going on? I can see that part of my model is getting clipped off. We need to hit the zoom extents button underneath the hand. Zoom extents. Okay. And then zoom. You have to zoom back in here by hand, I think. But now we can get in here super tight. That's one of the nice things about the parallel projection is it doesn't have that clipping issue, but you're also forced to not be in perspective, which looks a little bit weird for some, for some views. Parallel projection. Did everyone get that? So camera, parallel projection, and then zoom extents. You need to probably do zoom extents after that. You should just re-import it. I lost mine, I think, when I canceled out of that operation. Okay, so not yet. I like the blunt. I like the bluntness. Okay, is everyone ready now? So you have your image back up here, right click, texture position. So now we can actually zoom in here. So this is where I want you guys to just wait and watch, and then we'll step back through it together. So I'm going to pick up these pins and place them on the corners of this building image that I'm going to use to then stretch to the different locations. Are you guys getting dizzy right in the front row? So after I've placed them, and they need to be unfixed, they need to be the same color, all one color. Quit doing that. Then I can actually stretch these out to the corners of my building and hit enter. And instant texture. Okay? So let me undo. Right click, texture, position. So two steps. One, you want to position your pins on the image. And you zoom in there, get in there good and tight. To do that, you click, you tap on a pin, and it gets in your hand, and then you zoom in and tap again so you don't click and drag, you click, move, and click again to position them on the image. After you've done all four, then you do click and drag to stretch those pins to the corners of your building.
So the yellow ones are movable?
The colored ones are too, but they do different things.
My pins are staying at the ends of the image every time, like they're not getting to the edge of the building, even though they're not checked as first.
I think you're gonna click, let go. You have to like really zoom in. It was like.
Okay. Yeah, so you click to pick it up, and then you click again to place it, and then after you've done all four of them, you click and drag to stretch that.
My right click doesn't work. Is there any way I could do it without that?
I think as a Macer, I think you can control click still.
Oh, okay.
So I have all these color pins, but I don't think
Okay.
these are right.
So right click and do that guy.
Okay.
Is this the thing that you said was like a temporary stage of like having this texture?
I have no idea. I'm totally lost.
Okay. Never mind. You said, well, this is a way you can do this kind of temporary. Maybe I just made
I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Why do you need to import that as a texture, and why can't you do it as just a single image?
So what happens when you bring? So there's kind of a third type of group. So there's components groups, and then there's whatever the mutant thing is that you bring in when you bring it in as an image. So it's like a locked group. You can't change it really. It comes in as an image, and it looks. I mean, it brings this information in, but you can't really manipulate it in the right ways. So that's why. You are limited to 4 pins, yes. You cannot totally rubber sheet the puppy like I would love. Okay. So unfixed pins, click to pick them up, click again to place them. Make sure that they're all the unfixed yellow color. And then click and drag to stretch them to the corners. So do that for the 2 other sides, and then hit enter. You can also right click in that process to hit accept. So do another side. So if we do the front, file, import, greenhouse front as a texture, stretch it out generally. Texture, position. This one's a little trickier. You're gonna have to kind of guess where some of the corners are. Your SOL.
Is it possible just to like cut off the roof and like kind of make it a separate?
Yes, you can. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just textures. But yeah. So what I'm doing here is, I mean, I chose these 4 points. You could have chose the roof as one of those 4 points. Maybe I could do this instead. So those could be my 4 points. But yeah, I mean, so what I could do, so I've placed this on there, and for whatever reason you want the roof to be different, what we could do is just divide this surface, so just use the line tool, and then what we can do is stretch, texture, position, just this top part. So maybe it needs, I don't know, maybe it wants a door on it too. So you can do that. Because I've divided that surface, you can work with those two. You can retexture that other surface differently.
Can you use textures for curved surfaces?
Yes, we will talk about that. The short answer is textures for curved surfaces are difficult. They're cumbersome, and there's semi-advanced tools and other 3D modeling programs to handle these very specifically. SketchUp does its best.
That brought up a question for me. If you have, like, let's say you're in plan view and you just have all these curves, and you're trying to get that to turn into a surface, sometimes it doesn't like that. And what I've done before is divide that curve up into really small slices. Is there a better way to?
Yeah, so you're making like a path that's like floating in space,
Right.
and you're trying to get it to basically fill in and to make a surface.
Right.
That's just the way it is. They're using if both those curves are flat, they're on the same plane and they should be filling in. You can actually use the terrain tools, from contours it'll stitch for you. It'll stitch together those triangles for you, which helps. So you have to clean up after that, and that's great. Remind me. We'll cover that. But yeah, no. When I've done big road, like a road surfaces that are like a grid of them, you always just have to go back through and connect different points to get SketchUp to realize it needs to fill them in. That has not gotten better. Okay, so is this making sense? So you just keep doing this. I mean, these are individual textures. You're stretching to each individual face.
So basically when you go out and take pictures, like if I wanted to go take pictures in this greenhouse for this, they don't have to be, they can be like skewed, like one was in an
Yeah, I do both. The ones on the corners of buildings work better for you to understand how it comes together, where that chimney is at in relation to the other stuff and so forth. But the ones that are straight on look better as textures. A little perspective never hurts much. And once again, even this side that was at a pretty steep angle really isn't that bad. That I think was on, which one was on the near side? I mean, even the pixels that are on the far side really aren't that bad. So, some perspective just doesn't hurt. One of the things that's nice is if you have a perspective of a corner of a building, you can, if you texture this one side and then suck up that texture and put it on this side, it'll automatically have the edge shares in common already positioned correctly. So it's a little bit of a shortcut if you're really frantic. I don't know, it's only going to save you like 30 seconds, but.
Yeah. Is there like a way to copy and paste the texture?
Okay, yeah. Do we need to talk a little bit more generally about textures? Because this is just one specific method of, this is of not repeating. Okay, so let's back up here. So this is a flat plane. I did bring this in from Google Earth, but it is just one big flat plane. Let's make a box. B is the default shortcut for the paint bucket. And when you choose it, you should get this materials box. On the Mac, it's a little bit different, and it's been a little while since I've done SketchUp on the Mac. So I'll come around, and if you guys are really lost, I'll help you. But the concepts are the same. So there's a library of stuff. Colors, which get used a lot by me. Some of these other ones, roofing, some of these roofing ones aren't that bad, but there's a lot of just throwaway materials that look cheap and used and not sexy in here. So if we go back to colors, if I want to do this red here, so you can click on here and your active material pops up here in this location. This is indicating where your active one is. If you want to go back to, if you want to untexture something, you can't really have a material. Every surface has a material. If you want to apply the default material, the whitish purple stuff, there's a button for that. It's right here. So that is essentially untexturing, I guess. So red, okay, so now this is closed. I don't know where this red is. I've lost it. I really want this red now to go on this side, and I've chosen a different material. The way to suck that material up, just like you would in Photoshop, you use the eyedropper. There is no eyedropper tool. And it's really disappointing that it's actually not even down here. There is a modifier key. On the PC, it's the Alt key. Turns it into a eyedropper.
There's an eyedropper in the materials.
On the Mac?
No.
On the there it is. Good call.
And it's command.
Command. There you go. So that's how. So the eyedropper will make your active material whatever you just clicked on. So then you can place your red wherever you would like. Let's talk about some of these. So you can bring, just the same way we brought in these textures and stretch them, you can bring in repeating textures. So if we go into the library and choose something like brick, and same thing, I just click on here and I get some brick. But let's say that I think that this brick is too small. It's the texture, the individual bricks are too tiny. I want huge bricks, for like a retaining wall. There are a couple methods. So I have this brick still active. If I choose the Edit tab, I can change its size right here. So if I want that whole image to get stretched, let's say 3 times, I can just type in 9 feet, and it gets bigger. And that's weird. That works. I actually never do that, ever. If I want to stretch a texture, what's nice is that did it for everything. But usually I'm a little more visual, and I don't know, because this image has 5.5 bricks across the top, and I don't know. I don't want to do that math. Math sucks. If I right click, I can do the same thing. Right click, texture, position. But instead of this time using the unfixed ones, if I right click and make them fixed, the fixed ones do some different stuff. So the red one, if I click and drag it around, it just basically pans that image. It just offsets it. The green one scales it uniformly, which is what, in this case, what I would be trying to do. It also rotates it. Then the blue one will stretch it vertically and then does some shearing. And the yellow one, if you ever want to touch it, if you find a real useful use for the yellow one, give me a call. Tell me that that's going to be useful to you. It's just insane, but it helps round out the process there. So that's how I stretch out this texture. Now what I did though, so if I hit enter then to keep those changes, I only really made those changes to this one surface for this particular material. If I want to replicate those changes, I have to suck this texture back up, because these are, believe it or not, 2 different textures. It's not just the image, it's also the scaling relationship of it also. So if I suck this up and then paint it onto this side, I get those larger bricks. Did that all make sense? Should I start asking these negatively? Did that not make sense? Okay, so I mean, so it's the same. It's the exact same process. So if I brought in I am sure I actually can find a material. So I'll just do it to show you. Import. Oh goodness, computer, data, 3D resources, textures, brick. How about you? As a texture, same thing. And I just click and click, get it on there, and then I'm going to make sure I resize it. Texture position, and then maybe I'll drag it to the corner, and maybe it needs to be that big, and then enter. And there it is. If I want to find it, so there's select edit, and then really there's a home button. Hopefully you Mac guys can find it. The home button shows you all of the materials that are used currently in your model. So you should, this one's, it's not selected. Let me eyedropper it. So there it is, brick. In fact, it's the very first one. They are in alphabetical order, I believe. If you can, one of the things that happens a lot is your model starts to get too big, and maybe you need to clean out some materials that you're not using. There are two methods to doing it, and so this is worth noting. If you go to Window, Model Info, the very top one, there's all kinds of cool stuff in here, and hopefully we'll have time to cover some of it. Statistics, if you choose statistics over here on the left, there's something called Purge Unused. And it's just like for your AutoCAD junkies, the same thing as Purge. If it's not being used, it's going to delete unused layers, unused materials, unused components. So so you can have a definition of a component, just like you have a definition of a material, but not actually have it in your model anywhere, and it would delete it too. So if I purge unused, it'll, a couple of these shifted, and next time you save it, your file will get a little smaller, hopefully. The other thing is if I'm like, I need to get rid of stuff, and I'm using all these materials, so I know I'm using these two types of brick, and maybe I just won't have brick in this model. I'll just let those faces be red or whatever. You can right-click on one of these puppies and just choose delete, and it'll give you this box that says, hey, this is being used. We're going to replace it with the default material. Is that right? So yeah, so it goes white and it goes away. Same thing here, delete this, and then it goes away. So one of the things I did for those white buildings you saw in those Farragut images is when I imported a building, the first thing I did is just do that for all of its textures. Delete all those, so I just had them default and then went through and made the windows black. Okay, questions? That was a whole lot of talking.
Does it take more memory to display textures versus just plain color?
Like in terms of rendering, how fast the model renders, or in terms of your file size? Because the answer is the same. It takes less. I mean, just plain textures or plain colors are way less. There's always a tenuous balance between doing 3D modeling and for 3D artists about how much do you model and how much do you texture. Because good textures go a really long way, and you can have really simple geometry that looks good because it has a nice texture on it, versus modeling windows with recesses and stuff and then having really simple textures on them. There's a balance, and it's part of the whole style, personal touches thing. Anyway, okay, so textures, did that all make sense? That was a ton of verbiage.
So it looks like you're using the same thing for cars too.
Yeah, so cars, so this gets into somewhat advanced concepts, but it's quicker for SketchUp to render one image, one JPEG, with those 3 different sides than it would be for 3 smaller JPEGs applied in the same way. So if this was one 1024 by 1024 image instead of 4 512 by 512. That's uber 3D programming insanity, but okay. This is pretty advanced. You don't need to try to get to that level. Doing it this way should be enough, as long as you scale down those textures. Texturing, stretching them, repeating. One sexy thing that the colors let us do, and this will probably be useful, it certainly has been to me in the past, is we're gonna, I don't quite understand the end game for this project, but let's pretend that we are going to make some paths and some planting beds, and we're gonna this is irrelevant based, oh, maybe we can use this stuff that's here. So I'm going to make a planting bed. I like this curvilinear thing. Good use of the freehand tool. Maybe there'll be another one over here. We don't want gardens, we want manicured nature, which is obviously not, I'm sure, what this project is about. We're gonna have some straight paths here. Maybe I'll use a curve here. We'll do something like this. And then we'll select that line and use offset, give it some thickness. Line tool, close that in. Okay, so I've got this path. If you guys, we talked about the blue-white thing just to feed your anal retentiveness. To change that, to reverse those faces, if you right-click, you can choose reverse face. So I'm going to be anal retentive here. So in my materials, I'm going to choose green. This green can be our planting beds, and then this gray can be our sidewalks or our paths. And maybe even our paths are really, really sexy, and we've got some banding in here. Maybe a little kind of highlight here, some more banding. That's not evenly spaced. That really looks nice. And we'll put in, look at this, I even have a concrete texture. Well, here, let's actually do some concrete there. Ooh, not there, there. And then this brick here can be our bands and that. Okay. So you have to do a cost estimate. And, oh my God, what are you doing? So you have to do a cost estimate, and you need to figure out the amount of mulch and liner for your planting beds, and you need to figure out how much concrete and brick pavers you need. So I'm going to put this stuff all inside a group, so I make sure that it's separate from the rest of my model, because I'm almost positive I'm using at least some of these materials somewhere else. So if I go double click and go into this group, I can then right click on something and choose select all with the same material. And now I selected pretty magically all of my, in this case, planting beds. Right click, entity info, shabam. There is my square footage. Drop those guys into an Excel table, and you can do really quick area takeoffs. And this gets used all the time. It gets used for literally, I literally did this for a underpass project in Louisville. We've done it for, like, to do FAR calculations and like land use stuff. Parking ratios, it gets used a ton. It's super helpful. Being able to think about these materials as also a way to come back. And sometimes I have like two sets of stuff. I'll have actually a building model, and then inside that there'll be a group of floor plates that are color-coded by use. So commercial, office, residential. And then it's easy for me to come back in later and quickly get those area takeoffs. Okay, so the trick is to make sure, because I know I'm using this concrete over back on that other model, if I put it inside one group, it'll be isolated for when I do the select by material. So if I right click, so these are easy. I could just double click on, I could click on there and I get my area. But it's a little harder maybe to select all of this concrete here. So if I right click on one of the chunks, I can go select by material, or select all with same material. And then you can see it selected all those chunks. And then if I right entity info, either underneath the window, or I can right click and pull up entity info, it will show me the area right there. It'll also do it for length, but you have to select just edges then too. Like sometimes retaining walls get done by, although they get done by face speed, but anyway.
When you're selecting it for, everything that has the same material, what if you have like a sidewalk that's made of brick
Yeah, so that's why I put all this stuff inside one group, so it would only select stuff inside this group. When I went select all, that's why it's in this group. Because I know that I have this concrete used on that other model. Also, so even if I had brick benches in here, if they were groups, if they were components or groups, they would not have gotten selected by this. Okay, let's talk about layers. There are a couple schools of thought. I even watched a little video tutorial not long ago. Is anyone familiar with lynda.com? They actually have really great video tutorials, really great stuff. Lynda.com, Lynda, I think. I know they have a SketchUp one. They have a few. They have a couple. They have lots of great Adobe stuff. You have to pay at some. I don't know if there's some kind of educational discount, but our office had a subscription for a while, and there's. I mean, I'm a huge dork and I learn stuff. It's a real good way to get someone else's interpretation of how to use it. Anyway, the person there disagreed with me about this, but this is the honest truth. Layers in SketchUp are evil. Layers in SketchUp are evil. There is one and only one, well, 1.5 reasons why SketchUp included them in here. And the main one, the one part, is to interact with the CAD world. Because in CAD, layers are the primary way of organizing your drawing. In SketchUp, it's groups. Do not use layers to organize your model. Do not use layers. So don't put. I'm sure that if you had this on one layer, planting bed 1 layer, planting bed 2 layer, it would still select both of these in that scheme if they were both in the same grouping hierarchy like this. But you would never do that because that's wrong. Here's why. Everything in SketchUp is there's 2 chunks of everything. There are surfaces and edges. And small nightmares take place when a surface is in one layer and an edge is in another. And it's really easy to do when you're making individual parts of your model go onto different layers. Things get lost, you start drawing, and unintended consequences happen. So under no circumstances should you ever put lines or surfaces onto different layers. If anyone tells you differently, punch them in the face. I'm not kidding.
Before this, we were under the impression that layers were a good idea.
Yeah, whoever said that, you should have punched. So the other half.
I did not say that.
The other half of this is the half part is that if you put entire groups or entire collections of groups on layers, that's okay. Because it gives you a quick toggle to toggle off on and off all of your trees or all of your buildings. But you only move entire groups, just the container part, not the stuff inside, just the entire group to different layers, so that it's just a toggle. Because this is useful because it gets cumbersome if you have different alternatives or if you have phasing for a project. It gets cumbersome to keep track of both different views in your tabs. To have different views and different geometry turning on and off and phases. So it helps if you just then use the layers as kind of your other quick toggle for that stuff. So you'll put all of your groups related to phase 1 on your phase 1 layer. And you can just toggle that on and off, and you can have a whole nother set of stuff for your phase 2. And some of that stuff gets replicated,
And then you can assign different styles to different groups if you want. No. Okay.
No. So there are some stylistic things. We haven't talked about those at all yet, but you can make things look sketchy. There is such a thing as a line style in here, but it's like a universal line style. You can't make a dashed line, for example. You can't make one dashed line, which is a nightmare. I do a lot of land use stuff, and it's having a dashed arrow point at something is a need too often. So it's pretty frustrating.
So there's no easy way to change line weights?
You can change them only universally. When I need to make something read Boulder, I just give it I actually outline it. So if it's like a land use-y, kind of like a plan view thing, I've done lots of just plan view, and let me show you one in fact. For one of the pro features is this thing called Layout. It's a separate program that comes with it, and it's like a page layout system for SketchUp, and it's actually pretty cool. It's a little cumbersome. I still think that they need to give it some more. They actually need to give it some love, but it's pretty useful. So it lets you basically X-reference a SketchUp model right into a page space. So then changes you make in SketchUp later on get reflected instantly in that layout space. But that's a pro feature, so I don't want to harp on it too much. Where was I? No. No. Best work. Still. Longmont, Alley. So as part of this project, so hopefully a couple of you maybe are familiar with it. Preview. This is the alley improvement project in Longmont behind Main Street. So we did all this landscaping stuff, and these are helpful graphics to help decision makers understand what we're doing with these silly arches. If anyone's familiar with them, they've been there forever, and they're art in public places thing, and it's a political nightmare. Anyway, part of that then was only part of it. The thing that was more important were actually these. Hopefully this is the right one. These site plans. Oh my goodness, not the right one. Here we go. So these are all done in SketchUp too. So it's not good just for 3D stuff, it's good for plan view stuff. So this main part of the model, not these little text tidbits on top, but this main image, those are all right from SketchUp. This is out of, these things got added in that program Layout. But when I need to give something some additional emphasis, in this universe, you just have to give it an outline and give that outline a color. That is the unfortunate reality. It is something SketchUp's aware of. They're working on that issue.
Can you talk about? Well, I don't want to. If you have more to say about this, please do. But can you talk about format? Just talk about exporting to other programs and formats.
Okay, what time is it? Okay, so we have. Okay, okay. Let me attack some of that stuff, and then we'll talk about the sandbox tools. So it's super easy. File, export, and you guys should have. I think you should have 2D graphics on the 3.1, and even I think animations. I think those you can even do too. But export 2D graphics. I don't know everything that's under here, but JPEG for images. Bring those JPEGs into Illustrator or InDesign, whatever your page layout preference is. PowerPoint's not that bad either, actually. So that's how you make images. Underneath options, you can change. You can either have it be the exact number of pixels that are back here in your screen, or you can uncheck that and type in something. There is a max. On even my beefy monster computer at home, I've never got even really basic graphics to go much bigger than 5,000 pixels on a side. So 3 to 4 is usually the kind of the high-end max. Which is, it's big enough for plotting. I plot stuff for all the time using those scale images. Anyway, so that's that. I believe to export to something like AutoCAD or 3D Studio Max, you need to have the Pro version, and that's a great, in my opinion, differentiation between I definitely work in an office and I'm doing professional things versus. I just think it's a great breakdown. So you're not going to need those. And if you do, they're right there. The dialog boxes are really, really simple. I'm going to say that, and it's going to be like all kinds of crazy stuff. Watch. Yeah, it's crazy. You actually don't export CAD stuff from here. You do it from the 3D one, but so anyway.
What would be, we talked the other day about exporting as the Pro will export as a vector file that you could then use say in Illustrator?
I have not, in all honesty, done a ton of that. I always just bring in the raster graphics, but here's, I mean, so if I do that, let's go to a plan view. Let's see what we get. Camera, standard views, top. Okay. So export. There's two different exports. There's 3D model stuff, which is great for exporting to AutoCAD, and then there's back export 2D, which is a little more kind of page space like. Export, so PDF or EPS. PDF, options, full scale. I don't know. That's insane. Okay. I believe I've tried this before, and it doesn't work good. What it does is ends up rasterizing a lot of the stuff. So I end up getting strips of image rather than vector lines. It might have to do with the image being there, but we'll.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with what's in your view when you export it. So
transparency.
If you like hidden line, then your lines come in actually editable with endpoints and control points that you can manipulate in Illustrator.
Hidden line.
Shadows and things like that come in as filled shapes that you can then manipulate.
So what's the file type then that you say?
PDF, either EPS or PDF.
PDF will save.
Yeah.
But you have to have it like on a hidden line style?
Yeah, in my experience, I don't know that I've ever tried to not do it on a hidden line style.
Because I think I've never tried that, and I always get, I always just get image strips. Okay, so we'll let that open. Let me look at it. So I want to talk now about the sandbox tools. So, no joke. Oh, did that layers grouping stuff make sense? Clearly, I just stepped on someone else's toes. But I just think about this. You never want your surface. The real issue comes from, it's really easy to have your surface on one layer and then the edges, or only some of the edges that bound that surface, that make that surface, on a different layer. And that just gets insane. So if you're aware of that main issue, then you can do whatever you want. But it's just easier if you only make entire groups go to a layer. Oh, there's some stuff here. So you can't, it looks like you do get some vector stuff in here. I haven't done it a lot, so I can't speak to it, but you can do that stuff and then give it the line style action. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about sandbox tools. Okay, so a couple things. You guys don't have Pro, so what I did is I tried to make what could be a CAD import. It would be something like this, except there would be some layers, and that's not relevant. So here are some contour lines. Here is a road that you're trying to cut in. Here are some retaining walls, and here's maybe some plaza. And maybe this is even flat, but so anyway, so we have to turn this on. Not all of you probably have it turned on. If you go to Preferences, Window Preferences, on the Mac, you're actually under the SketchUp Preferences, I believe. You go to Extensions, and then make sure that the sandbox tools is checked. First goal, make sure it's checked. It might be, okay? Then underneath View Toolbars, Sandbox Tools. Or it just says Sandbox, I guess. So here, it's this little guy here. So we have this set of contours, and we want to now create a terrain. And this is really useful for more than just terrains. So just keep that in mind. Like if you want to make more irregular shapes and you just have outlines of some of the key locations, the same thing applies. So this is a group, we have to double click into the group. So inside of,
I turned on the sandbox, but that box didn't pop up.
what does it look like? Oh, is it just in here somewhere?
No, nothing came up.
Oh, you have to go to View Tool Palette and Sandbox.
Yeah. You have to turn on that tool palette. View toolbars, and it should be towards the bottom somewhere. You select these contours, and then press there's two buttons here in the beginning. One's called From Contours, the other one's From Scratch. You press the From Contours button, and it stitches it together. Yeah, so all you need to do, for whoever just asked that, you select all of your contours. You have to go inside the group. You can't do it from a group. If I just select this whole group and click it, it says, hey, you don't have anything selected. So you go in there and then select all this stuff and then press the From Contours button. And it stitches it together. So what this made is it made another group. If we go into it, it's a 3D surface. That's just it's a tin. It literally, what it does is it just, hey, I'm a vertice. Where's my next closest vertice? Let's connect it. Oh, okay, so it just basically zigzags together. It's really stupid in the tool. If you just triple click on it, you can show these. These are like hidden lines. And you can see, like in some places, you can see that it actually filled in on the outside of some of the places. So really, that's the contour line there in blue, and it stitched on the outside. So there's sometimes some cleanup involved with these if that was wrong.
Wait, so I made it into a group, and then I tried to use the sandbox tool, and I know that you can just set it.
You go into the group and then do it. You don't need to make those contours another group.
Okay.
Let me back up for you. So I have these contours here. They are a group already, and I just I could either ungroup them, or I could just go inside of that group and then select all of them individually, and then press the From Contours button. Okay, so I have this group. So let's explode this. Exploding is ungrouping. If you right-click on it, and then we should have our contours, which we could either delete. Sometimes they're actually nice, depending on the style. I'm going to leave them. Question?
Yeah.
You don't have this toolbar?
Yeah, well, the step before that.
You just have to go into the group.
No, like, I'm talking about.
One of the purposes, I think, is just
So underneath Window Preferences, Extensions, make sure that Sandbox Tools is checked. Okay. Thank you for translating.
So it's not letting me select explode.
Are you back out here in this whole model space?
Yeah.
So if you select it, right-click, explode's not an option there. It's not going to do a lot right now, because there's that. So the hierarchy is one big group, and inside of it there are the loose contours individually, and then there's another group that is the terrain, the stitched together terrain tin. Explode. Okay. So then I have these loose contours, and if I click on the surface again and choose explode, then they kind of all knit together. And this isn't, you know, I kind of like the look. I think it helps read to read the landforms a little bit better, leaving those contour lines cut in to it. But if you dislike them, we can do something called softening to remove them, which we're going to talk about right now. So did everyone get back to this point? So if you just explode that puppy twice, you should have the landform with the thin-edged contour lines cut in it. So now this sounds insane. We're going to triple click on this thing and make it a group. Okay. There's a wonderful menu or a wonderful palette called Soften Edges underneath Window. So, like you saw when I first triple clicked on this thing, there's all these little dotted lines that represent all of the individual triangles that make up this surface. This concept of softening is one that we remove those edges from kind of the rendering process. And because we want this shape, this landform, to look softer. It doesn't have these crisp edges that look jagged. So what we can do with this thing is just drag this bar, and it will remove as few or as many lines based on the angle in between them as we want. And then there's a great checkbox here for Soften Coplanar, which if you move that up to 180 and click Soften Coplanar, it should be one smooth blob of terrain. Also, conversely, if we for whatever, we're going for some kind of stylized look, where we do have some of those, but so we kind of find some middle ground for that softening. And but we don't want quite all of these. Like there's too many right here. We can use the erase tool to do them by hand. And if you look at the bottom, Control equals Soften Smooth. So if you hold down the Control key, this is one of the rare instances where your cursor doesn't change at all. But if you hold down the Control key and click and drag over these, it's not actually deleting them. If I were to delete them, I would get a hole in my model. But what it's doing is it's actually by individually softening out some of those lines that you click on. And it's the way that you clean those things up by hand. So these lines do a couple things. In addition, so let me make it into a complete blob here. Smooth, soften, all the way up. Okay. Those lines do a couple things. In addition to being just a graphical element, they also help define different surfaces. So if you wanted to, like I was texturing that walk, it was one flat plane, but then I said this chunk's gonna be concrete, then this band is gonna be pavers, and then this next, the same thing applies here. I can have lines cut onto this surface that get textured differently than other parts of that terrain model. So if I wanted to do that, we're gonna undo after this here, but if I wanted this road that's getting cut in here, not to necessarily be graded in, but just to be a different material that sits on top of it, you select that road, and there's a tool up here called Drape. So think about it the way you might think you were going to drape an air photo over this. We're going to drape this vector line work straight down over the top of this terrain. So you select your element you want to cut into, you use your drape tool, and then you hover over, and it should sort of auto-select the whole group, and click again. And it cuts it on to that surface. Huge note here. If you want SketchUp to crash, this is the step in which that'll happen. Any of the sandbox tools, basically, which is disappointing. But they usually they're complicated. They're these lines getting cut into these other things in these complicated ways, and there's usually lots of triangles, and things just go wrong. Save before you do anything with the sandbox. It is absolutely the highest point at which things are going to crash. So we have this road cut in here, and if I double click on my group to get back into it, we could choose our paint bucket, And we could choose red or green maybe. Green for all of that, and then gray for this. And we have 2 different materials. Or this brick paver, or anything we want, like. So that's how you can cut different surfaces into a terrain. The method I generally like to follow when I start thinking about terrain and having to deal with it is you have to work in 2 different places. You work flat. You have to think about, just in a 2D space, what elements you want and how you want those to come down and affect that terrain. Because it is extremely hard just to draw right on top of the terrain. You can do it. I mean, it's just a collection of triangles. You can actually draw on it. But it's cumbersome, to say the very least.
Can you do it the other way around, where you built everything, like created your planes and shapes, and then you have the contours, and it kind of drapes it all at once?
Let's say I've designed this plaza. I've kind of thought about it. I've got my contours working on it. It's this 2-tiered plaza. There's going to be some stairs in here, and I need this to not just be draped onto here, because this is insane. You know, this is like a 2-to-1 slope here. That's totally unreasonable. It's certainly not ADA. What I need to do is I actually want to get this arrangement. I want to get this flat chunk, and I want to have this slope where my stairs are going to be, and I want this other flat piece, but I want them to be, I don't want to use the word seamless because this is a pretty coarse way to do it, but it's a great start. I want this to be cut and sculpted. I want SketchUp to help me grade this shape into the land. There's another tool up here called Stamp. So if I select this group, it doesn't have to be a group, in this case it is, and I choose Stamp, what it does is it tries to, there's this offset. If you look in the bottom right, and there's this red line that is an offset. So what it does what it's thinking is there's 2-tiered thing here. And what it does is it flattens that out, and then it literally does an offset. And that's the amount of horizontal space that it's going to use to try to taper this terrain into this shape that's being forced into it, that's being stamped into the ground. It'll make sense here in a second. So it's at 1, which is a pretty small amount. I'm going to type in, how about 10? 10's too big. 8. We'll try 8. Okay, so I just typed 8, hit enter, and then now I'm going to click on my terrain. Stamp will make things crash twice as often as drape. So what it's doing, then it lets you kind of move this around. As a rule of thumb, I always like to just move this puppy way high so it's hanging out by itself as a very separate entity, because it's really, if it's tall like that, then it's really easy for me to go back in, just select that stuff, and then move it around. And this way I can actually use the move tool and snap to things. You can't snap with the stamp tool. So as a rule of thumb, I like to leave the stuff floating up in the sky so it's easy to select, and then let me move it in really specifically to where I want it to go. And there's always little tidbits, like this. I wanted this ramp here, so some of this stuff here, I need to delete that, and I need to either draw in these lines. There's only a couple of them here, so maybe I can just kind of re-triangulate it for, that just took one. Erase that guy, just takes another one. In some places where it's more complicated, like here, there's a few lines. If you get a whole bunch of that stuff, think about using the From Contours tool as a stitcher, as a little seamstress. If I select just the outline of, so let me deselect that. So if I select just the outline of the gaping hole in my terrain, I can choose From Contours, and it will fill that in. Now it's a group, so I just have to then go explode, and I got it stitched in there. And I can still see that we've flattened out one of the parts, but that saved me at least a couple minutes. If I was missing a whole side of this, that's definitely how I'd go about doing it. So then I can select the top of this thing, use my move tool, be really specific, and get it. I missed something. We'll have to clean that up. Get it really specific to where I want. Erase some of this insanity. See what needs to be. So it's hard. I mean, this is not a one tool to rule them all kind of thing. This is definitely a stepped process. We're going to be trying to fix it. Let me just use the. Oops. Okay, that one needs even a little more love. Explode. But so that's that concept about how to merge in something really specific, proposed grading, for example, into an existing location. And I use this all of the time for even large projects and save regularly. It looks like I slid it over to the side. That's part of the problem. So, those are really the two tools that you use, and you just have to use them iteratively to accomplish something. Now, clearly, either I need to lay this earth back farther so that it's not so steep, or I need to put in something like a retaining wall. Retaining walls get tough. One of the methods that I would do. So let's pretend that I am stamping this road in. I'm actually going to put in a flat road into this fairly undulating terrain. The first goal, I think, is to cut in my retaining walls and delete them. These are just going to be some holes that I'm cutting into the ground. And then I'm going to use my stamp tool. Something small like 1 foot, something less than the width of my retaining wall generally. Watch it crash. And we'll put this, I don't know, somewhere, maybe like there. And then I still have these puppies. I can make the walls. Oops. I have no idea. But I start to then, now clearly they need to not all be the uniform height, but that's how you can start to more specifically carve in walls into a stamped condition, I guess. Was that just crazy? I meant like, did you guys follow that? Not like, am I amazing? I'm not looking for kudos. Those are the concepts. If you have, and there's just so many. I struggled to think of some real crisp, simple. This is as simple as I could make it. And there are 1,000 variations on all of that. If there's something specific maybe you'd like me to demo that's going to be relevant to this project.
Does SketchUp still have the feature where the perspective feature where you can kind of have a background image that you know you're going to use to render, like contextually, and then you can kind of use the...
Yeah, there's something called photo match, and they do have it, and it is useful. When I've taught this stuff before, it's been a whole 2-day class. For that specifically, is two whole sessions. So it's pretty cumbersome. I don't think we have enough time. But the methodology to get there is, so just to talk about other resources, because clearly in the remaining 30-ish plus minutes, we're not going to cover everything. YouTube has great videos, and has great videos. So if you type in SketchUp photo match into YouTube, you'll find 3 at least different tutorials on how to go about that. So the idea with photo match is that you bring in an existing site photo as your background and use it to either build an existing condition or help do like a photo montage with some proposed changes in the foreground. It gets used for both. It doesn't, I don't think it works as well for the photo montage thing. Its real goal in SketchUp was to help you build existing buildings. So you bring in, just like we did. So instead of knowing the shape of the building that we had for the greenhouse, what we do is we would bring in those reference images and sort of define where the axes are on those images and use those to help us build the building. And then what's nice, a great benefit about that is because you already have the building aligned to the image, you can just force that image right onto the building you just drew, which is a huge bonus too. So resources. So YouTube is a good one. Lynda.com has a bunch of stuff. There's this guy, Daniel Tall. He's an uber SketchUp dork too, except he writes books because he can spell, unlike me. And he has written a couple books that I had they're insanely long names. But if you type in Google and Daniel Tall into Amazon, he would be someone I would recommend. I'm gonna make him buy me a beer for this. So those are online, Lynda. Yeah, those are some of the resources. Other project-related steps in the right direction. Oh, we didn't even talk. Okay, sorry, I got a few other things here. So let's close this. We can finally close the starter project. In that same folder, there should be another one called O2 Google Maps. Oh, I can't believe we didn't. Okay, so what I did. So there's this base map that got sent along to me that it's going to be part of this project, I assume, and it has a scale on it, and it's got an air photo kind of faded behind it. Hopefully the scale is right. We'll scale it. We're going to bring in because this is a little grainy. I think we should probably bring in an actual air photo to be our base, and then this is going to be just something that's referenced that sits on top of it and maybe gets hid at the end of the day. But here's the process to bring in resources from Google Maps. So underneath View Toolbars, you should find Google. Should be this small little pellet. And this is super easy. Add more imagery, the very first one on the left. And if you're on the internet, you should get this. Yeah, I think it's just because it was where I searched last. So you're going to be zoomed out way out here. You're going to have to type in Boulder, maybe, and then navigate yourself up here. If you don't know where the site is, it's sort of halfway up towards North Broadway, and there's generally the site. So there's a couple of tidbits here. This little add imagery utility remembers the very first. Well, every time you come back to it, remember the first tile that you bring in. It only brings things in at screen resolution. And it brings in this little Google thing and some of this terms of use stuff. So having done about 1 million of these, there are a couple practical tips. So this is too low res to be useful. This is less resolution than that image that we already have in there is, in fact. So really our goal is we want to bring in something maybe not like this, but maybe at that scale. But it's certainly much smaller than the whole study area. So what you do is you zoom into a chunk at what you think is the most resolution you want. And then choose Select Region and stretch this puppy out to the full window. Be a little anal retentive about it and get it in there. because we're going to tile together a series of these. And then as soon as you get it stretched out, choose grab. And that's where it brought it in for me. You can slide this stuff over. We're going to position, in every model, I like to have one thing that I think of as the truth. In this case, I'm bringing in all this air photo imagery. It's my truth. Google supplies really good stuff. I mean, I might not do, avoid doing a survey for a project if something's getting actually built, but it's really good for the planning, design, scale, the stuff that we do. And so we brought in one tile. If I choose that again, add more imagery, I have screwed up. Okay, we need to, it's because I've played with this before. Let's just close that and choose no, and then just open up a new blank Google SketchUp document. Mine's gonna look a little different than yours probably. So let's do that again. Same. How come you keep going there? I don't want to go there. Okay. So let's try this again. It's whatever. We'll hope that this doesn't do it again. Is that too close? Maybe like that. Okay. Select region. Okay, that should have worked. So now the next time I go back to it, it was because I had used that model and brought in imagery before to test out this and messed it up. If you do this from a blank one, it'll work. So you click on it again. It goes to the exact same location, my very first tile. 3 clicks. 1, 2, 3. Select a region and then choose the whole thing again. What this does is gives you just a little bit of overlap between the tiles. And because these are referenced relative to one another, they fit really well. There'll be little seams, and if you're anal retentive like me, you can ungroup these things and clean them up later. But getting them in here is the first real goal. So do that again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this is insane. And you would be astonished at how large of projects, because we don't have GIS data for, I've done this for. Just astonished. And the same thing down. 1, 2, 3. And so forth. And the other thing that's interesting too about this is oops, wrong button. It's also relative based on your size. So if I then decide, well, I want some context, but I don't need it to be at the full resolution of everything else, and I zoom back out a little bit and then choose this, it'll bring this in also, but at that different resolution. So I still have these guys in here that are really nice and have small pixels, but then I have this context out here. So it brings that stuff in both, relative to all the imagery pretty well. If you get out too far, you start to get some more gaps, but you can do pretty large areas this way. What happens? What's going on here? Because your guys are all going to do this too. Is when you import something from Google this way, it makes a locked group, actually makes 2 locked groups. It makes a flat one, and then it makes one with terrain in it. And there's not a lot of terrain. This is pretty flat. But you can see that there's a little bit of terrain. So this button here just toggles on and off essentially 2 layers. So if I open up the window layers, we didn't talk enough about layers yet, did we? It brings in 2. So you can see that when I just press this, it's just toggling the visibility between the snapshot and the terrain. If this was my project, I would probably ignore the fact that there's any slope across it because it's so minor. From a visualization perspective. My goal would be to delete the terrain part. I don't need that. So I'm going to turn on the terrain one. I'm going to select this group, and I'm going to right-click and go unlock. Whenever something is outlined in red like this, by default, it's because it's locked. So if you right-click on it, you can go unlock and then delete. And same with these guys. Select all of those, unlock, delete. And then I can toggle back, and if I want to really delete these layers, you can select them and press this little minus, and you get this really wonderful dialog box that gives you some options. So I'm trying to delete these 2 layers. I can move the contents to the default layer, move them to the current layer, which is what this radio button indicates. They're both the same at current. Or delete the contents altogether. I'm just going to move the contents to the default layer, layer 0. We didn't talk about layers, so maybe I should take this opportunity. Let's grab a tree maybe. Window, components. I'm just going to type in tree to the 3D warehouse. Hey, you're going to see here's a great learning lesson here. There's going to be a ton of 3D trees. Some of them will be good, and other ones will just destroy your scene. So this one, for example, is a bad tree. I don't even know how many polygons there are in this thing. The ones that have individual leaves like this are bad. Your computer is going to be able to handle a dozen, maybe if it's fast. Don't use this type of tree. For a lot of my projects use just the flat ones that kind of always face you. It used to be called billboarding. Use those ones. Don't get hung up in the 3D ones unless it's specifically like a low poly 3D tree, and a lot of them will say that. Oh, computer. So what I'm going to try to show you here is how to move a series of these groups onto a layer, or from a layer. Okay. Oh my goodness, what is this thing?
You said before that you kind of keep like the ones that you like. How do you organize that, or is there like a file where you can save the ones that you like? There is kind of a built-in library. I don't use it. I just keep a folder of SketchUp models of things I've collected that I like. So what I'll do is I literally open up another. This tree's. Look at this thing. I mean, this is a pretty fast computer, and it's just destroying it. That's just insane. What am I doing? So what you do is they're just SketchUp models, and you just copy and paste from your library model into your current model. That's all I do. You just have like a tree model.
I have a model. I have one model full of a bunch of vegetation, and I have another one full of people and cars and so on. Some textures. There's got to be a simple tree here. How about low poly? This is silly. Okay, here we go. So this is entity info, a component, and it's on layer 0. If I wanted to make oh my gosh, delete this. I'm sure this is a good lesson. A lot of components, people have built their components on different layers. Those layers come in too. So if you end up with random stuff in here you didn't generate, that's probably why. Okay, so I'm going to make a new layer called trees. So I just press the little plus there, trees, and that's where all my trees are going to live. So what I'm going to do is, I would do this. I'd maybe do some of that sweet array action, and I could either send all of these to trees by underneath layer info choosing trees, and then they just exist on there, and I can toggle them on and off. Or let's push them back to layer 0. I would suggest even more strongly that you group your trees as one big group and then move that one large group to that layer, and then let that be the toggle. And this is a great use because you're going to have a bunch of vegetation. Vegetation's a big memory suck because you need lots of little things to help it look better.
That's just the nature of the beast. And if you put all that stuff there, this will be a quick way for you to toggle that on and off so you can work efficiently. Let's see. So that was that. Where I was going was to bring in that other image. So we have this. What the other thing that's gorgeous about the bringing in this aerial photography is that's also to scale. It's to a pretty accurate scale, in fact. So what we're going to do is we're going to import that garden's base map in, and we're going to set it to scale. We're going to use this image to pull off a key dimension or two and scale that other reference image. So here's how we go about doing it. Let me just stick this thing in here. So import, there are a couple ways. You know, I personally like to never bring in, where is it, R? I don't like to bring in textures as images, or images, whatever it is. Reverse. Import, desktop. SketchUp training. Okay, so there's use as texture, there's use as image. Let's just pretend that there are a lot of good reasons to do this and you should just do it my way. And always choose use as texture. So I already drew a little rectangle for it to go onto. The reality, I know you guys aren't going to buy this, so let me just tell you. If you bring in something as an image, it's a weird amorphous group that's sort of locked and it doesn't let you edit it. And the very first thing that we bring when we bring in a reference image like this is that we need to scale it. And it doesn't let you do that. So you're just kind of creating extra work. So just make a rectangle, even if it's not the right size, and choose as texture. And stick this puppy in here. We'll scale it up that big. We'll use our line tool and we'll cut off the unnecessary part. Okay, and we'll make it a group. Okay, so now we have this group. A couple of things. This has a graphic scale on it, so I'm going to assume that that's right. And double click on this thing. We can do some magic. So we could measure this. Okay, so this is currently the distance is like 202 feet in my model, and it needs to become 320. And I could get out my calculator and figure out what the scale percentage is, and do that. But that sucks. Math sucks. So you can actually use your tape measure tool to do that scaling for you. The concept is that you measure a distance and then you tell SketchUp what you actually want that distance to become. The one caveat is that because I have this air photo in here, I don't want to screw up the scale of this air photo. I only want to affect this one image. So to do that, you have to make sure it's a group, and you have to use the tape measure inside the group so its changes are limited to just this group. So tape measure, click there, and now I'm going to type in 320 feet, enter. And this box will come up every time. Do you want to resize the active group or component? If I did this outside this group, it would say, do you want to resize the whole model or the entire something? And you would be changing things that were previously correct. So you want to make sure it says active group or component. Hit yes. And now if I draw another line, I can just double check. Now this one is, you guys can't see it because it's at the very bottom of my screen, but it says 320. So now I could, let's see, so what are some real visible elements? So the tennis courts are probably a good one. Maybe even this little crossbar on it. That's one good thing. We'll can't quite see it here because I brought this in too low, but it's about there-ish. Let's get rid of these trees. And then somewhere kind of on the other side, the greenhouses. Let's just do the greenhouse. So here's that corner of the greenhouse. Okay, so that distance from the tennis court crossbar to the opposite corner of the greenhouse is just shy of 1,300 feet. So hopefully that's what this is. So if we go from here, is it from the opposite corner? Yeah. So if we go from here to here, It's actually not. Is the scale off on this by chance? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for. Okay. But that's okay. We already know that. So this is wrong. We'll just cross that out. But even more the reason why we did this is that this is correct. This is really worth taking to the bank. So we know that same distance now needs to become, we'll just do it again. We'll use our tape measure, we'll snap to the tennis court and that line and go 1,300 feet, enter. Yes, we want to resize it. And now we'll come in here and grab you and stick it right there. And now it makes you go a little insane, but if you look at some of the spots, you can see as it flickers that it's really, really close. It's certainly close enough for government work. It's really funny how many government people actually say that. It's terrifying. Terrifying. So that's kind of the process for bringing something in and getting it in place and getting it to scale, most importantly. So now there were those buildings. Here's a great example. So I had back over in this Google Maps one that I made that I thought we were going to be able to use. These buildings were already popped up. We can copy. So this is how if you have your own personal library of stuff, another model, or if you're breaking this model up and you're doing a group thing, you can have people work on different parts of the model in different places at different times. You can, as long as they share the same common base, you can copy and paste things into place real easily after the fact. So I'm going to copy this. This isn't going to come into place because I've changed everything. But if you just go up here, edit, copy, paste, just Control C, Control V, like literally everything else, and then go paste. There is paste in place, but it's not relevant for this. And we'll stick it in here. So it looks like we have to scale that too. So school maybe to this guy. 1577, go into this group. Oops. 1577 feet, enter. Yes. Pretty close. So that's how you can kind of put that base together. I then would make some scene tabs that maybe show and hide some different geometry. I like to have kind of like a working one. So there are a couple things that are going on here. We need to unlock all this air photo stuff. Unlock so that we can hide it. We can't hide it otherwise. So the scene tabs we haven't talked about. Well, how much time do we have? No time? Is class really over at 11? Or is that when I get kicked out of here?
That's when I think, that's when I need to take my section.
Okay, last thing I was going to talk about then is styles and scene tabs. So scene tabs, the most abbreviated version I can do this in the world. Scenes are those little things that we were using before. Before, we just had it memorize the camera location. But it also can remember things like hidden geometry and what layers are showing. So if I wanted to have one where it's just air photo, I can hide this. I guess we're done. So just to talk about, so scene tabs, they're really easy. They help you organize your model, and it's a great idea to think about presenting out of SketchUp. I can't tell you how useful this is. I mean, making boards is good, but if you're at a location where there might be an opportunity for some interaction, doing a presentation out of SketchUp is great, because if someone asks how tall is that, how wide is that, you can measure it real quick. Anyway, look at it from another view. That's something I do all the time. Last thing were styles. Styles are also really, there's a whole bunch of default kind of sketchy line styles, and they're just like any of those other tool palettes, there's a styles one. Just click and play through those. You can edit them, you can have a sketchy line, like the default, a lot of the default kind of sketchy pen tools lines. don't have textures, but you can change those so that they do show textures. If you get in there and just play with it, it's pretty hard to break anything. I would suggest trying to move away from the goal of a photorealistic simulation without any lines to one that does have them. I think that graphical style is more appropriate and way more attainable. Good luck.
Thank you.